Great to have everybody on today. Today is our monthly 30th Afterlife series of monthly sessions, we'll call it, every month. And it's really an open forum for any questions that you have about the afterlife. My name's Kelvin Chin, and I've started doing this it was about a year and a half ago, I guess. And it's on the 30th of every month, so obviously it changes days sometimes, depending on when the 30th of the month is. And it's always at 12 noon Pacific time. So then you can kind of do the time zone differences and so forth. 3 p.m. on the eastern seaboard of the US and uh, Europe, etc. And Australia, I think it's 7 in the morning or something, depending on, if they move their clocks. I can't remember if they move their clocks like we do or not. But anyway, same time, same day, every month. And it's really about anything related to the afterlife. So it's really any questions at all about the afterlife, doesn't matter what. And sometimes, like today, sometimes we'll have a topic that we'll open up the discussion with. And William Baldridge, whose nickname is Widge for obvious reasons, he goes, the beginning and the end of his name put together. His nickname is Widge. Widge is going to help me today with our discussion, opening the discussion about soul plans, soul relationships, soul groups, that whole notion. Okay, so Widge is going to help me with that at the beginning, and then we'll open it up wide to the open forum, I call it. In other words, ask me anything about the afterlife. How this relates to the 30th November talk in 2014, it somewhat relates to it. It's not completely related one-to-one with it in a sense. There are ideas that come out of that talk that was given in 2014 on the 30th November. There are some ideas that I've been teaching for a long time, even before 2014, and there's some new ideas that came out of that talk. If you haven't seen that talk, you can go to 30thnovember.com and watch that talk. But there's some ideas that came out of that that I've been speaking about and teaching on and so forth since then as well. Some of the ideas I'd already been thinking about and teaching somewhat, but then got some refinements out of the 30th November. That's how I suggest that you all view that talk. That's my point of saying that, is you can kind of, if you want to think about it this way, mirror what I'm doing in my teaching, and you can be your own teacher of ideas out there. And you may not consider yourself a teacher, but we all are. And we're all sharing ideas with other people all the time, whether it's just our family or friends. I'm not saying you got to go out and do seminars and stuff like I do, but we're all teachers in our own way. And that's how I suggest that we all look at that talk that George Hammond gave on 30th November in 2014 as a kind of a reservoir, if you want to think about it this way, as a reservoir of different ideas, and takes those ideas out of that reservoir of ideas that resonate with you. Not, the ones that don't make sense to you, you don't. But you take the ones that make sense to you and that seem to have helped you, and you can share those with other people. That's how I view myself, and I think we all are in that way in humanity. We're all like planters of seeds, aren't we? Really? We're planting seeds and ideas, and do they germinate? Do the ideas grow and so forth? And maybe they grow into a huge tree. Maybe they just grow into a small bush, and then we move on to a different seed that we're working on growing and nurturing and so forth. So that's how I view ideas and concepts. And I think ideas and concepts are helpful because they can help us live a life that's freer from suffering. And those of you who know, who've worked with me before, you know, I'm the anti-suffering guy. I'm the guy who tries to reduce our anxiety, reduce our fears and suffering. Okay. So I'm going to share screen with you guys. Let me get this PowerPoint up that Widge created. Thank you, Widge.
Thank you for your help with it. It wasn't just me. It was a joint effort.
It was a joint effort, but still, I like thanking you anyway. So let's see. How do I got to get this on slideshow? Here we go. There we go. And then I'm gonna put us on speaker, I think. Let me see if I can do this correctly here. What happened? What did I just do? What do you guys see right now? Who do you see? You see the
I
slide?
see 5 or 6 of us up on the top, but a big shared screen with the slides, with the first slide.
You're still seeing 5 or 6? Okay.
Yeah, on the top, but mostly the screen is the slide.
All right. Let me see. Where is it? I'm trying to look for speaker. Trying to look for the speaker. Yeah. All right. You see 5 or 6 of us.
Yeah.
That's good enough for now. All right. Here we go. So, okay, Widge, you can run with it, and then I'll make comments. Go ahead.
Okay, great. So, yeah, so the topic is soul plans and soul relationships. The way we decided to do this is just to sort of throw out a number of ideas and kind of we'll run through them. And if we stop along the way for discussion, that's great. We'll see if we can make it through them. But we're very open to comments, questions, other ideas. So the one of the questions that emerges from this topic is: do we come into this world? Are we born into the world with soul plans in place? That's one of the questions that we wanted to get at. And what is the role of free will in making those plans, those soul plans, and also breaking those soul plans? And then how and why do soul plans and soul relationships change during our lives? So we come into the world maybe with a plan, but end up going in a different direction. How does that work? And then another question that's real relevant for some people in their lives and certain relationships: why are some soul relationships so challenging, which is sort of a nice word for difficult and exasperating? Why are some soul relationships challenging and others so pleasant and so rewarding? Like, what's up with that? What are the typical relationships of a quote soul plan? What are the typical indicators of a soul plan relationship? What are the markers of a relationship that's born from a soul plan? How can we spot them? And then the final slide is let me see here. Yeah, which there's sort of two paradigms.
Well, let's come back to that.
Okay, sure. Okay.
So let's get into these ideas first.
Okay, good.
So so do we come into this world with soul plans in place? And so first of all, let's talk about what a soul plan is. And sometimes people will use the phrase soul contract. You may have heard people use that phrase. I prefer the phrase soul plan. I used to use the phrase soul contract because it's so widely used, but I'm moving away from the word soul contracts because, well, a lot of you guys know that I have a legal background. I used to be a lawyer and all this. Thing is, a lot of people who are not lawyers don't realize that contracts can be changed, and contracts, unfortunately, can be broken sometimes. There's consequences in the legal arena for that. But when we're talking about souls, this is not a legally binding situation. So that's why I like to use the word plans instead of contracts, because for non-lawyers, for lay people, they think of contracts as being ironclad, written in stone. Not the case, okay? Especially when it comes to soul relationships, soul plans. So can you make a plan beforehand, before you're born, to come into this world? Yes. The short answer is yes. Does everybody make a plan to come in with other people before they come into this lifetime? I don't think so. That's not my experience. Some people come in very haphazardly. The notion that people think that everything on the other side is somehow perfect and everybody has figured everything out on the other side, and then somehow you get incarnated onto planet Earth and everybody's confused, is, in my experience, a complete myth. It's this kind of idyllic, mythical think thought process that humans have come up with because they find life sometimes so difficult. And it is. I'm not saying it isn't. But it doesn't mean that everything on the other side is perfectly figured out, and then all of a sudden you get confused when you're born on planet Earth. It's our same minds. That's the thing. That's been my experience. And then those of you who have read my book, this book, my third book on After the Afterlife in my past lives, I give you explicit examples for how in some lifetimes I was more confused than others, and I was less confused, and I started figuring stuff out over 6,000 years and started shifting my thinking and my belief systems, quite frankly, about the universe and God, and if there is a God, and all that stuff started shifting over 6,000 years, gradually. So my experience is that our minds do change and can grow, um, and that includes on the other side. So we can have soul plans, but not everybody's going to come in with a soul plan, because look around yourself. Do everybody you see in your life have their everything planned out in their life? No, of course not. I would say, if you're really being candid, you'd say that most people on planet Earth don't have things planned out in their life. They don't have their job, their relationships, their, you know, everything. I mean, a lot of things, occasionally people will plan a vacation out, or they'll occasionally plan stuff out, but a lot of people don't. They don't. They're opportunistic, and whatever happens, happens. And if this job falls in their lap, then they do that, and they may be miserable, but they don't make a change. And people are not, they're risk averse and they're change averse. So soul plans do exist, and we can create them. And my message to people, and my suggestion to people, is to create soul plan on the other side. Now that you know that it's possible, I suggest that you do it. Connect with people on the other side that we resonate with, and then come into a lifetime, this lifetime or the next lifetime on planet Earth, with some idea of getting together with them. So what's the role of free will in this whole idea of soul plans? And Widge's point about that is that when you and I talked about this, Widge, is that what there we can make our own minds up, and sometimes other people's make their minds up too, right? And we can change the plan, can't we? You want to talk a little bit about that, Widge?
Yeah, I mean, it's just that, you have a plan, just like everything else, all your other plans in life. Many times your plans go awry.
Yeah.
You either change your mind or someone else changes their mind about what you're going to do, and things go off in a completely different direction. And it's the same way with soul plans. You can formulate a plan on the other side with people that you really care about, that you have had a lot of interaction with, that you want to work with again for one reason or another. And you get here and you start doing that and you change your mind or you change your direction, you never run into the people. It's just all manner of things can go right or go wrong depending on free will of the two parties involved. And people change, their circumstances change, conditions in life change, and a lot of that is a result of other people's free will. I mean, somebody you had a soul plan with might have stepped in front of a bus or may have picked up a horrible disease, in travel or something. So there are so many variables that it's really difficult for any particular plan to hold up for long, which kind of brings us to this other point that you can also develop new soul plans probably even while you're here,
That's a
but
really,
through
really
work
good
and
point.
communication on the other side.
Yeah, talk more about that one, Witch, because that's a really good point that a lot of people don't think about.
Yeah, it's just that it
Hmm.
I know that in my case, the direction of my life changed professionally back in about 1996. And all of a sudden, I connected with somebody that was just very productive professional relationship. And we've worked together for 25 years. And it seems to have been a soul plan that maybe I developed in this lifetime, before he and I met. And it's just been really productive for both of us. And it just seems to have sort of come out of nowhere. I'm not particularly aware of other pasts with him. He's not really a great person in a lot of ways. You really wouldn't want to have much of a past with him, but he's been very focused in doing a really good job in a certain area of my career area of international development, and he's profoundly productive. And it's just been a great relationship. Um,
That's a great example. It's a great example, Witch. It really is. Because I think most people are thinking before they come in, there's a plan. And then the plan is it working out or is it not working out? But most people are thinking that they come in with a plan and it's going to work out because they incorrectly think that plans are written in stone and they're not.
yeah.
Right? And then they think that because it's not working out, they're doing something wrong and they got to get back in line with their soul plan. This is what you hear in spiritual circles all the time, right?
Yeah.
Got to find out what my soul plan was or my life purpose. Sometimes people use the phrase life purpose. Same, I think it's very similar. And then they go, oh, I'm not doing the right thing. Oh, now I got to get in alignment back with my life purpose, right? And so can that happen? Sure, that can happen. But a lot of times it's it's out of your control, like Which says, and sometimes other people's choices are influencing and affecting your choices that can derail your plan.
Mhm.
But Widge is introducing this newer idea, which I love, which is you could create change your soul plan or your life purpose or whatever you want to call it
Mhm. Mhm.
midlife,
Absolutely.
right?
And get just remarkable support for doing that. I want to introduce another concept that we didn't really put in here. It's just that
Yeah.
that turning within, meditation, getting rid of this sort of stress in our life, we're kind of more in sync with 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 what's really apparently in store for us. I mean, it seems that soul plan adjustments happen more easily and more productively the more we get rid of sort of, crazy thoughts and obsessions and extreme fatigue and anger and stress. Um, I think that plans can be sort of amplified on the other side in connections that we would never otherwise make, and running into the right people at the right time we just wouldn't happen without the getting rid of the stress that we get rid of from turning within. And so I think that by doing this practice that we all do, we're more prone to really receiving cooperation from the other side and having the right kind of connections fall into place for soul plans to kind of be made and go forward. That's my sense of it anyway.
Okay, there's a couple of really good key points that I want to expand upon what you just said, which is great stuff what you just said, Which. So two things. The 2 points are, and you can remind me which when I come back if I forget what the second one is. Yeah. Which is strengthening the mind. Okay, strengthening the mind. And then the other point that I want to come back to is help from the other side. Okay.
Yeah.
So the strengthening of the mind thing, what I want to say about that is, yes. So what Widge is talking about is we clear out our detritus, the junk, the garbage, the stress, the anxiety, the baggage. As we clear more of that out by turning within, meditating, connecting, and changing our brain, blood chemistry, biologically, and then psychically and energetically balancing ourselves, we make our minds more powerful. What does that do? That not only in terms of what Widge was saying, helps us align more with whatever the plan may have been, but also coming back to this really good point Widge raised earlier about other souls, other beings can do stuff that will mess up our plan. Like, for example, what? I'll give you a specific example, and I'll give you a specific example of how a stronger mind can help still make the soul plan happen. Let's say Widge and I are on the other side. Our souls, okay, are on the other side. We don't have names yet. We don't have the Kelvin and the Widge name yet. But let's say, 60, 70, well, no, how do I say what you're going to say? 100, 120 years ago, Earth years, Widge and I are on the other side. We're not born yet. Okay. We run into each other and we go, hey, Widge, let's get together. Let's get together and, let's grow up together. Let's go to elementaries. Let's get look at, there's a family there and a family there, and they live in the same town. Let's go into those two families because they seem like, and I have a connection with the mother in that family. And Widge, you have a connection with somebody in that. They live in the same town. Let's go into, and we can grow up in the same town together, Widge. So let's just say this will kind of do a simple soul plan. No, not a complicated one. That's our plan, Widge and I, okay? Okay, we come into those two families. We're living in the same town together, right? We haven't met yet because we are in the womb. We haven't been born. Where our bodies are being born, but our souls have communicated, okay? Now, we're both in utero, literally, but in the same town. Widge's father gets a phone call from Widge's father's boss that says the board of directors of our company just decided that we're closing the company down in this town and we're moving everybody to this other state.
Yeah.
And then Widge and I grow up in different states, okay? So that's a simple example of how Widge and I have no control over that, even though we set up this plan, okay? And then not only that, but it's not even his parents changing the deal. Maybe they don't even know about our deal. Let's assume they don't. But even if they did know about our deal on some subconscious or soul level, it's the boss's boss's bosses. It's the board of directors. It's like 5 levels removed from his father. The decision is made to close the company down and move it to a different state. All right. But back to the strength of the mind thing. The stronger our mind is, Widge and let's back to the story here I'm making up. Widge and I are then born in these separate states. We're 500 or 1,000 miles from each other biologically. Okay. But our soul is still connected on some level, energetically, psychically, whatever you want to call it. Maybe subconsciously, maybe we're not even consciously aware of this. Let's assume that, okay? Widge and I are not even consciously, we've forgotten about the soul plan, okay? But subconsciously, energetically, it's still there, and we're just unaware of it at that moment, at the moments in our lives, and we're growing up in these separate towns. and we both learned to meditate, let's just say, in the story, which actually did happen this lifetime. So we both learned to meditate. We're in different parts of the United States. Excuse me. And because we're strengthening our mind from the inside out, now our minds are stronger. We get more alignment with whatever that subconscious or conscious soul plan, either way, is existing. And we get together, and maybe it's delayed. It wasn't in elementary school like we said we wanted to on the other side, but we're 50, 60 years old and we get together, right? There you go.
Yeah, that kind of stuff happens for
Yeah,
sure.
that can happen. That can happen. So that goes to Widge's point about what can we each do to strengthen ourselves from the inside out more and more to help with this alignment. And back to this other point I want to mention about, can we get help from the other side? Yes, we can get help from the other side. And there may be those on the other side who remember what the soul plan was. They are. And they may whisper to us from the other side, and sometimes we may hear and sometimes we may not hear. I know there's some people on here, I won't call you out, who are very, very psychic, and they get messages from the other side. But there's others of us here in this meeting right now who don't. It doesn't matter. You can still get whispers from the other side and your mind can pick up on the message without knowing who the messenger was from the other side. That happens frequently. But does that mean that they are controlling you or no? No. That's just like a friend whispering to you on the other side is the way I look at it. But that can happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to go to the next one, Widge?
Sure. Yeah. So the next one has to do with this paradigm of do we come into this world with a preordained, quote, divine plan?
No, hold on. I'll go into the challenging one, the bullet.
Yeah. This is a good, this reminds me of my own brother-in-law, a very good friend. And I actually, of all my friends, the one who spent the most time really learning from the 30th November address. He's had an absolutely horrific relationship with his father. Just could not, really bad news from day one. Even though he's had a very productive, wonderful, happy, healthy life, and in every other way, his relationship with his father was just horrific. And his dad was not a nice guy either. Anyway, he one day had the memory of a past life. He was in the Civil War, and it was the end of a battle. There were dead people all around him, and Harry, my brother-in-law, was kind of in the front of this formation. And all of a sudden, he got shot in the back of the head. He got shot in the back of his body somewhere. I think it might have been around his neck or his head. And he wheeled around before he collapsed and died and saw the guy who shot him. It was one of his own men. Harry was kind of the leader of this little brigade or whatever. And he recognized him as his father. Anyway, they had apparently just been at each other's throats for lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. And they had agreed to come into this lifetime to try to work out their differences. And they tried for about 60 or 70 years until the father died. They still hadn't quite gotten there, but they'd made a lot of progress. But some of these lifetimes, some of the lifetimes that we choose with other people can be to work out really difficult to resolve differences that have resulted in massive conflict in prior lifetimes. And others can be, well, in fact, I've had one of those that worked out extremely positively, a lifetime that with an individual that had gone horribly bad back in Greece, bad for me. And this person was quite unfair and unscrupulous, and it didn't work out well for me. And I ran into him again in this lifetime, and he subconsciously recognized me, just like, locked in on me. And chose me to work for a very, very successful company that he had, and just sort of literally paid off this debt from a prior lifetime. It was really, really interesting. And Peter, it was the brother-in-law of a friend that you and I were in college with in Santa Barbara. It was, a small. This guy had been married to a relative of somebody who was at MIU Santa Barbara with us. But it's sort of a small world. But you can have, there are difficult relationships that you can resolve through a soul relationship in this life, and sometimes those can be very difficult, or they can be pleasant. And there can be many examples of relationships, of productive, pleasant relationships from the past that you bring into the current lifetime, because these are people you care about and you want to be with, just because you resonate with them so well. And those are generally really rewarding relationships.
Yeah, I want to comment on something you said about debt. You used the word debt. I want to make it clear to people that there is no debt that is created other than the debt in your own mind that you create in that relationship. So in other words, there's no cosmic accounting system that's saying thou shalt resolve this debt.
Yeah, no, he felt guilty about what had happened, and I felt bad about something that had happened back in Greece a couple, I don't know, 2,000, 2,500 years ago. And we both felt bad about it in different ways. And this was a chance to kind of resolve it. But it was very clear that's what the relationship was. Had a vision related to all of that, 15 years before I met him. His lifestyle and his habits hadn't really improved at all, but I was working in a different context with him, so I didn't suffer from any of that, and benefited from his brilliance and his productivity. And it was just a nice resolution of a relationship that had been very troubled in the past.
Yeah, so, that's a great example. It's a great. The reason I say that is because somebody else in the chat asked something I want to read that relates to this point. And then I want to talk about soulmates. Somebody else, Sharon wrote this. I'm going to talk about that. But CC wrote, may I ask about the purpose of soul plans if we have no guarantee of following them? Is there any problem with not following your plan? So again, underlying, I'm not sure how you're thinking about this, CC, but I just want to, it reminded me to say this. So whether this applies to you or not, it applies to many, many people. And that's this notion. That's why I pointed out the word, when Widge used the word debt, he accurately reframed it just now to everybody in more of a relationship issue between him and this other person. I think that's the more accurate way of thinking of this, because the way Cece's asking this question, it seems to me that you might be, I'm not sure, Cece, so I'm not here reading your mind here, but the way you ask the question anyway, it seems as if you're thinking that there's this plan that's created for you. No, the plan is created by you and others to follow or not follow. You can follow the plan or change the plan. That's what we're saying. And so you're kind of answering your own question. If you understand what I just said there, you said, is there any problem with not following your plan? No, it's your plan. So it's not God, there's no gods, small g, plural. There's no angelic beings. There's nobody else other than the people who have created the plan, who are involved and invested with whether they follow the plan or not. I hope that helps. Okay. These soul plans are just a fancy word, fancy phrase for saying relationships amongst different beings. Okay, that's what it is. Relationships amongst different beings who came up with an idea that they thought was a good idea, and they decided to try out. That's what a plan is, right? So that's what this is. And now back to Widge's point here that he has in his bullet here about challenging, and some are pleasant, some are not so pleasant. Yeah. And this goes to the point of soulmates. which you hear that phrase a lot. Um, just because you resonate with somebody doesn't mean that you need to go out and marry them. I'm just going to be really direct on this, right? How many times have you ever gone on a date? Has anybody here dated before in their lifetimes? You know, how many times you've ever been on a date with somebody and then find out 2 or 3 or 6 or 10 dates into the dating that's like, golly, they're such a pig, man. I'm glad I didn't marry this person. Or God, they're just so abusive. I'm glad I didn't marry this person. But you resonated with them first. There was something that attracted with you to them, whether it was physical, so it could have been a biological attraction, it could be an emotional attraction. Maybe they emoted in a way that really resonated with you, and then you find out later that's not really who they are, but they're a really good actor, you know? And then you find out who the person really is. Just because there's a resonance at certain point doesn't mean that you go out and that's your life partner for your whole life, right? So so don't just go by that soul feeling or the soul resonance, this phrase that sometimes people use, oh, my soul just resonated with them. The vibration was so high. Okay, great. How, sleep on it, right? Wait a week or two. How is that a month or 6 months later? Whatever, whatever. I'm just saying, soulmate. Look, you could have a relationship and how personal am I going to get here? Let's see. I guess I'll go here. I'll just say, um, I could have a relationship with somebody who I was with a couple thousand years ago and married, but don't remember it. I don't remember that. Okay, now I remember it. But let's say when I first get together, and was it 50 years ago, whatever it was, get together, and it's like, oh my God, 40 years ago, whatever it was, get together. It's like, oh my God, this is amazing connection. It's just unbelievable. Fireworks, sparkly everything. Yada, yada, it's a Disney movie, it's like, and then you married a person and then you realize, oh no, not that behavioral trait. Oh, not that anger, not that. Oh, that rubs me the wrong way, right? You may have been together in another lifetime, and that resonance is that you feel this lifetime is because it's a recognition of that past lifetime, right? And so you want to act using your good judgment and your common sense and not just get swept away. That's all. So soulmates, this is twin flames idea. I wrote this down. There's this twin flames idea that's out there, and there's this documentary. One of my friends here was telling me she was watching this crazy documentary. I mean, no, well, it's a documentary about this crazy cult. And I don't know if twin flames is in the cult name, but whatever it is, it's this notion that the twin flame universe. That's what, yeah. So it's like this cult that charges you 2,000, 5,000, 10,000 bucks a pop, whatever it is, depending on how long you stay with them. And they've made tens of millions of dollars. This young couple, and this false notion that a soul can split, and then when you and have twin souls, there's no such thing. Souls are intact; they cannot split. Okay, souls are sovereign entities. You can't just split because anyway. So, but the idea is they split and then trying to get them back together again. So there's this couple is out there promoting this thing and charging people thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. Why does that catch on with people? One word: loneliness. The world of humanity, 8 billion people, there's so many lonely people in this world. They are. I'm sorry, it's sad to say, but it is true. But really, where does that loneliness come from? Comes full circle back to something which reminded us of earlier, of connecting with ourselves, turning within. We are disconnected with ourselves. That's the fundamental source of loneliness, because we don't know who we are. We're not connected with ourselves within, most people. Now, many of you are, but most people of the 8 billion are not. And that loneliness breeds this sense of desperation. How do I find somebody, etc.? And they externalize that internal strife. Internal disconnection gets externalized, and they think if they connect with somebody on the outside, that's going to get rid of their loneliness, and they'll pay thousands and thousands of dollars and they join some cult. Um, yeah, yeah. If you buy the next level program in that cult, exactly. That's the deal. Anyway, where'd you want to see what
Yeah.
typical indicators? Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say also just a quick aside on that topic. It is kind of less confusing. I've found soul relationships. I'm a straight man, so soul relationships with other guys can be very straightforward and less confusing. And extremely productive, just because there's less of that whole other dimension. I'm sure the others are quite good as well, but there it gets that the the two gender thing adds a whole different level of complication, and when it works, I'm sure a whole lot better outcomes. But
Well,
yeah,
yeah, the two gender thing. If you go male female, if that's what you're talking about, then you
yeah,
have the whole men are from Mars, women are from Venus.
yeah, that whole dynamic.
My
Yeah.
my old friend
So
Johnny Gray, who
yeah,
was,
Johnny Gray.
remember him from
So
the OPM days. But anyway, go ahead.
the last issue is what are the on this page? What are the typical indicators of a soul plan relationship, and how can we spot them? And I would just say one of the things to start with is this resonance. Just when you feel a real strong resonance with another person, or when you can sense that they feel it with you. And it's interesting. I was working with a gentleman in this company in New York that I referred to a while ago, and there was a guy who just repeated my name with a kind of a sense of reverence. And I was like, what is with this guy? I actually crossed my mind. Is he gay or something? Like, what is the deal? Why is he all about my name? And as soon as I met him and saw him physically and realized that he had kind of a serious physical ailment, it all clicked. And I realized he is my own grandfather. And I was using his name. I go and work by the name Bill Baldridge, and that was my grandfather's name. And he was a very unique character. I mean, he had very specific skill set that
So
was
just
kind of unequal.
to be clear,
Part,
Rich, to be clear to everybody else,
yeah,
what you're saying is this person you realize was your grandfather
grandfather in this.
reincarnated.
Yeah. When I was a little boy, he died when I was like 5 or 6, five maybe. He, was shoveling the snow outside of his house in Billings, Montana, just keeled over dead because he had like, I don't know, half a dozen stomach surgeries for stomach ulcers. And this guy, Peter, not Peter Griggs, a different Peter who lives real close to Sharon, um, had horrific stomach ulcers when I met him, but was tall and like a world class risk uh, risk manager. And my grandfather had been a very senior risk manager for the Federal Reserve. He was the uh, chief I forget the name, but like risk auditor for a number of Federal Reserve districts in the western part of the U.S. So and now that I've gotten to know, it's just clearly the same guy. They look alike. They've had really similar. Just it's almost like reincarnation. But I picked up on it because of his affinity for my name, which was really his old name. So but the how do you spot them is there's this strong resonance and kind of ability to understand the other and get along with them. And I found generally just a huge amount of productivity in those relationships. That you understand their ideas, they understand your ideas, and oftentimes you can come together for things that really work well together. So yeah, that's it's that resonance thing. From my side, I think other people, you, Kelvin, you and others will probably have other things to say on that. But those are some of the indicators that I'm familiar with.
Yeah, no, that's really good. That's great the way you describe that. And that's a cool story about your grandfather.
Yeah, and I'm in touch with this guy 5 or 10 times every day. I mean, every single day. The Peter in New Jersey and I talk. I mean, we had a conversation for an hour this morning. We
Yeah.
text 10 times a day, every single day.
Peter, who it seems to be the reincarnation of your grandfather who died.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I have many relationships from other lifetimes that I've recalled now. My children this lifetime. Those of you my new book, I talk about that explicitly, about my children, my son being my son in a previous lifetime, and my daughter being my daughter, and my sister in previous lifetimes, who's my daughter now, and my brother George and so forth in other lifetimes, and we've also been friends in other lifetimes 4,000 years ago. So some of these things are more clear and apparent. I have lots of relationships with people I don't know exactly when they were from and so forth, like Widge and others, but it's clear that there have been other connections. And sometimes, even in other lifetimes, maybe we weren't even connected in another lifetime, but there's a familiarity of that time period because, for example, Widge and I, without getting into specifics, were around during a similar lifetime. I mean, similar time period in our respective lifetimes, but didn't know each other. So, so that is also another source of resonance with somebody who you didn't know in another lifetime, but was around in that same time period doing similar things, but your paths never crossed even in that other lifetime, but they do this lifetime. So that's another kind of way that a soul relationship can be born out of something that is common in the past, but you didn't know each other in that past. Um, and then there are other romantic relationships that I've had that I seek to rekindle with people, um, who I know who they are now and who they were then. And for certain reasons, various reasons, maybe things got derailed, or never got railed in the past. And maybe I want to get them, you know, on track, to continue that analogy, on track this lifetime. So those kinds of things can happen, but it comes to these indicators are, as Widge said, there's some uncanny resonance. There's some uncanny connectedness. You can kind of finish each other's thoughts. There's this psychic connection. You know when the person's going to call you all the time, and you can hear the phone ring before it rings, and it's them all the time. How do these things happen? Those are energetic. That's how it's happening. So when we talk about soul, we're talking about our energy, right? We're not talking about our biology per se. Our soul affects our biology, and our biology affects our mind, obviously, but they're independent. There's something uncanny about that, you know? So Widge, let's go to the next one, then we'll open it up wide to other questions. And I have a question here that somebody sent me in an email too. Go ahead.
Okay, good. So back to this question about a paradigm. Which is the more accurate paradigm? A, we come into this world with a preordained, quote, divine plan, i.e., created for us by some other being, We succeed if we fulfill that plan, and we fail if we don't fulfill that plan. Or the other option, the other paradigm is we come into this world with a general plan, a few priorities, several pre-existing relationships and personality tendencies. We might work occasionally with our friends on the other side, to maximize the utility of circumstances and opportunities for us to grow and learn. Our life plans may shift and adjust based on our personal choices and the choices of others whom we may or may not know, as well as change based on the circumstances that are beyond our control, that may involve even inanimate things like the weather or availability of resources, etc. So these are sort of two paradigms, and much of the sort of new age world that talks about soul plans is all locked into this paradigm A, like preordained divine plan that we only succeed if we follow that plan, and this other more free will enriched point of view that Kelvin has been so good about bringing to everybody's attention. That no, it's not so simple, guys. Free will is a big actor in all this, a very big factor. And so I think we're both suggesting that maybe paradigm B is a better option, but we're curious if you guys have thoughts. And Kelvin, I'm curious if you would state it differently or have anything to add on that.
No, I think you said it perfectly. I think it was great the way we drafted the two concepts here. I think it pretty much covers the two general paradigms, and as you say, I think you accurately said, A is the one that's most taught out there in spiritual groups, and I don't, it's not my experience. My experience is that B is the accurate way to describe how these plans can happen. And you know, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, there either is free will or there isn't. And it sure appears to all of us that there is free will. So I think
Yeah.
the B one is
And,
more accurate. We
just to
get
be,
to choose and adjust.
yeah, and just to be clear on what we mean by free will, because George and I had a long discussion about this the other day, and he was, he's been steeped in this whole thinking for many, many thousands of years, lifetimes. And whereas I'm more an actor, I'm philosophically oriented, but I'm more of a doer rather than sitting around just thinking stuff. And thinking is important, fundamental. So I'm not denigrating it. I'm just saying that I teach myself more by trial and error as opposed to sitting and thinking concepts and see what makes sense. Although I do that to some degree, as you guys know. But I'm more of a trial and error, what works kind of guy. And free will to me is always just meant, can you make your own decisions? And but George was pointing out to me that in the world out there of spirituality and religion, especially, this notion of free will has a moral authority component to it, which I didn't even realize. I mean, I didn't think about it because I'm not a religious institutional type of guy. So those of you who have studied more religious institutional stuff, I learned from you, to be honest, about a lot of these religious institutions and what their belief systems are, because I've never really been I've never bought into them very much. But this notion of moral authority, in other words, that there's some higher authority that's telling you and everybody what to do and what's right and what's wrong and and the choices you should make. That's not what we mean when we say free will. Okay? So if you want to believe that, that's okay. I'm not saying to change your beliefs. You guys have heard me say this many times. You got to figure out what your belief system is, and I respect that. But that's not what we mean by free will. It's not about that. That's a religious way of looking at this concept. We're just using the words free will to mean, can you make your own decisions and can you change your mind? If you can change your mind, then you have free will. If you think you cannot change your mind about anything in life, about when to go to the store, about which dry cleaner to use, about what to eat for dinner, if you cannot change your mind about any of those things, then yeah, you don't have free will. But if you can change your mind about any of those things, you have free will in the way that we're talking about it. Okay. I'm just addressing some people because some people think, oh, you don't have any free will. You just think you do. No, the choice to not believe in free will is also evidence that you have free will. Right, Rich?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Thank you for this. I'm going to stop sharing screen. I want to read a question here from somebody. Let's see. I'm going to go on speaker here, speaker view. Okay. So for the recording purposes. So I got a question here about soul plans here from somebody who could not be here, from Kirk. Kirk, this is your question, of course. He's got a couple of questions here. How much core change or improvement in personality, temperament, and moral character should one expect or desire from a single lifetime? He said, you mentioned he saw me on this podcast. It's called Next Level Soul podcast. I think it's had 110, 115,000 views, that one podcast interview that I did so far. You mentioned on Next Level Soul podcast how souls who were narcissists in this life might still be objectionable narcissists during the in-between life. In other words, on the other side. I somehow speculated that souls during in-between lives would all be honorable and of high moral character who were prepping for their next reincarnated life adventure. I think I'm missing something. Yeah. So I'll work backwards here. Yeah. I think you are missing something that, again, people think that everybody in heaven is sprouted wings and they're all what? Kumbaya and playing harps, sitting on clouds, and everybody's doing everything. Everybody's nice and, what is the phrase he used? Honorable and of high moral character. No, when you die, you take your mind with you. That's my experience, having memories on the other side. That's my experience having been communicating with beings on the other side, of all different types of beings on the other side, since 1986. Beings who've been incarnated on planet Earth and now on the other side, beings who've been incarnated on other planets and now they're on the other side, beings who are on the other side who've never been incarnated in a physical, biological form on any planet before, and they just live on the other side. So all of the above, there's a huge range of personalities. And if you want to talk about moral character or honorable nature, whatever phrase Kirk's using here, yeah, there's this huge range. Everybody's mind is unique. Everybody's mind is different. So, yeah, objectionable narcissists in the in-between life are still going to be narcissistic on the other side.
There's another part of his question too, Kelvin, which has to do with how much progress can you realistically expect in the maturation of your personality over the course of one life. And I think we're sort of the same mind that it's good to have noble aspirations and big goals, but in reality, the gains are likely very incremental.
Really good point. Very incremental, meaning slow and steady wins the race. It's the turtle and the hare, it's an Aesop fable, isn't it? So, it's the turtle is moving so slowly, but still moving, improving. And so that's the choice that I make. Not everybody does. Some people choose to go backwards, right? You make that choice, or stay the same. Be a narcissist for thousands of lifetimes. In my experience, I've had some narcissists in this lifetime who I've run into, either friends of friends, or workers, in jobs, some narcissists, and they're really good at being narcissists. I don't play, let's see. I don't play in their sandbox using their rules, because they're so good at it after thousands and thousands of years. I'm not going to play those kind of games with them. My advice is get out of the sandbox with them and go to a different sandbox. Live your life elsewhere, because people who are cruel and abusive or narcissistic, they get really, really, really good at it. And as Widge says, they get so good at it that they like it so much that they keep doing it for a long time. And for them to change, for them to want to change, a cruel and abusive and or narcissistic person has got to see the light. Otherwise, they're not going to change. To them, the light is being a narcissist. It works. It gets people to feel bullied around them and then cower and feel fearful. And the narcissist, it makes the narcissist feel good. This is what we talked about last month. We won't get into a long discussion about this, but we spent a long time last month. You can look at last month's um, recording, and Widge and I talked in some detail about this whole idea of bullying and narcissism, and the seeds of which are that's a cruel person. All narcissists aren't cruel people, but that's the seed. That's the seeds of being a cruel person. So, if you want to help somebody, you want to alert them to their narcissism and try to head them off from the path of cruelty that they are on. So this importance of being important, narcissism, cruelty, all those the personality behavioral traits tend to go together. Here's another question that Kirk asked. As to soul plans and soul contracts, if a soul contract obligates someone to present a growth challenge to another, i.e., play the role of an offender versus the offended, the bully versus the victim, how would we know in this life whether offensive behavior is actually fulfilling a soul contract versus acting out with improper behavior? So here's the thing. Again, just to reiterate, this question from Kirk helps us reiterate the point that we've already made, that there is no obligation. So again, Kirk is still operating under this false notion that a lot of spiritual groups propound, which is incorrect, that there's an obligation that you have because it's contractual. These are plans. They're not contracts in the way that you think about them, like a legally binding contract. They are plans that can change. So there's no obligation that you have in that sense. You may have a responsibility to kind of work things out because you've decided within yourself that you want to work that out this next lifetime with somebody. But that's between you and yourself, you see? Okay? That's between you and yourself. Could you have made an agreement? Could Widge and I, let's say Widge and I had some falling out some 1,000 years ago, and we came in this lifetime saying, hey, we want to work that out this lifetime. So do I have a somewhat of a responsibility, and Kirk could use the word obligation. Do I have a responsibility or obligation to Widge to work it out? Yeah, you could say I do, but that's just between us. It's not some higher power that's saying thou shalt work that out with Widge. No, it's a choice that I'm making. That's the thing. And so how would we know? Well, you'd know because you'd know. It's like, is it working out or is it not working out? It's not any more complicated than that. Okay. But my advice also is that let's say that we did have that agreement. Let's just use Widge. I'm picking on Widge because I don't want to pick on anybody else here. So I'll pick on, and I know Widge takes it in the spirit of teaching here. So let's say Widge and I really did have a falling out, and we did agree to come in this lifetime and to work out our differences and so forth on planet Earth face to face, working out stuff, whatever it was.
Mhm.
But let's say it's not working out. Let's say it's not, to Kirk's question, we're not, it's not working out, the improper behavior from before, we're not resolving the
Yeah.
conflict. Well, there's nothing in the universe that holds you to trying to stay for me to work that out with Widge, or the work Widge to stay with, that jerk Kelvin Chin. Who's not working out the conflict. We can exit that relationship anytime. That's your free will choice and decision. And to me, it would be a wise decision. At some point, you got to decide, in your own lifetime, when that is. That's a personal decision between you and yourself. But there's nothing that holds you. I come back to the word obligate that Kirk is using. Okay. Widge, you want to say something?
No, I'm right with you. I'm agreeing with you. No, I was just in deep thought about how that's exactly right. You, you come into the life with a feeling that you kind of want to work that relationship out with that person, and you run into them, and they may be in worse shape than they were 100, 200 years ago, and you think, I don't want to see that person again. Or that other person may be kind of heading in the right direction, and you realize, yeah, that was a good idea. I should connect with him more and try to move forward, because there's this feeling that there's something there. But yeah, you may run into somebody that you had wanted to work something out with, and they've decided to kind of go backwards in life, and you meet up with them, you think, man, I don't really like that person. I thought there was something there, but that the person's missing the boat on things. Don't really want to be around them anymore. And
Yeah.
so that, free will, that's really the other person's free will kind of making choices that then cause you to make a different choice too. So that's all legit. Again, none of this stuff is set in stone. There's no real divine plan. We make plans, and we're free to amend them. And that's a good thing. It allows for our creative input in this life to make our lives richer and more fuller as we go. So yeah, that's what I was thinking when you were talking.
Oh, that's great. Really good comment. Let's open it up to questions.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes, Petrushka.
But because they always say, like, you will get born in the same family, but from your story, I think that we have a lot of different families because we come here so often. And you were talking about personalities. Like I always thought, like, because I had different kind of professions, and then I thought, how can I do this? So I thought, oh, maybe I have done that in a different lifetime. Different life.
Yeah. Our personalities are very multi-level, in a sense, multivarious, and for you could do many different things, Petrushka. Each of us could, if we choose to. And so we have different kind of tendencies. Some things you might be good at, on many things. Yeah.
If you just multiply out the number of lifetimes each of us has probably had against the number of people in a normal extended family, particularly in an old world setting, those were pretty big extended families. Not that everybody lived long, but there were a lot of people in those extended families. We're all really connected to a whole bunch of people. And when you consider that, then you reincarnate with your sort of larger group, you probably rub shoulders with a lot of those people, 100 times or more. So yeah, it's a big group, and we're, how it is. Yeah. It makes the world pretty small because you've got those resonances with these people. You're attracted to them. You kind of recognize them, and are drawn to them because you feel something from, some resonance from the past.
Yeah, it's a really good point. This point of soul groups, that we tend to come in and reconnect with a lot of the people who we've been connected with before, multiple times.
Multiple times.
Yeah. So this is, I mean, you think about familiarity. There's a couple of things going on. There's one is resonance, like what's the vibration, the personality, the kind of resonance, does that person resonate with me, or do they rub me the wrong way? So resonance, I guess, would be rubbing you the right way. That would be
Yeah. Yeah.
that would be the other way of saying it, because we have an expression in English, that rubs you the wrong way. So rubbing you the right way is somebody that you resonate with, but there's also the familiarity principle that I talk about sometimes. And there's a certain familiarity with certain people, and that familiarity kind of draws us to them over and over and over again. Soul wise, we're talking about, and then for most of us, this is subconscious. And for myself as well, I don't remember consciously every single relationship that I've ever had with everybody. It's mostly subconscious. It's very energetic or subconscious or almost emotional, or if there's something that's called sub-emotional, I'm making this up now, this concept. I don't know, Tom's the psychologist here. But whatever you call that, it's below our conscious thinking level, whatever we want to call that. It's below or beyond, or whichever we want to look at it, that can drive us. And to Widge's point, I think that happens to all of us more frequently than we realize. We tend to have recurring group relationships, over lifetimes. Yeah. It's a good point. Other questions? You just unmute yourself. Other questions? Let's see. Trying to see if any other questions. Let's see. I don't see any questions on Facebook. I was just looking. Other questions? I have a question here. What did Kirk say here? How often are soul contracts or soul relationships violated because one party is simply not living up to pre-Earth life expectations? Well, that's an impossible question to answer. Who knows? I guess Kirk is getting at the point where the people are choosing just not to live up to their soul plan, their agreement, basically. And that can happen for sure. Who knows? Some people claim that in their NDE, their near-death experience, was a wake-up call to steer them back to their intended soul plan. So yeah, that can happen. People can have different, wake-up calls, I suppose, at different points in their life, and it doesn't have to be an NDE that does it. You don't have to have a near-death experience, don't worry. It could be at any time, right? I think Widge has made it very clear in his examples, some of his great examples. This is kind of waking up to one's potential other agreements or plans that one may have with other souls. Can happen even in midlife, et cetera, et cetera. And even if they're a new plan that you create in midlife that's not even pre-birth. So you said blah, 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 blah. Yeah, so Kirk, I think that's a fair assessment, what you said there at the end when you're watching this recording. Yeah. So anything else? Other questions?
Kelvin, I have a question.
Yes, Caroline.
So I don't know if I'm a tiny bit confused, and I don't know if I missed something while I had to sign off or come back in. But
Yeah.
these soul plants, so my understanding is that it's something that we didn't, I guess, consciously choose to do now, living in this life, but it's something that was kind of maybe predestined in our previous life. And if that's the case, how do we know in this life that that's the soul plan we have to follow, or may or cannot follow? So
Yeah.
I apologize if you covered this, but I'm just a little bit confused.
Oh, the fact that you're expressing your confusion means that there are other people confused too. So it's never, don't apologize. It's always helpful for everybody. So here's the thing. No, so just a couple of fine tunings of what you're saying there. You were summing up. No, our soul plan, what we're saying is, most people are referring to the idea of pre-birth this lifetime, not creating a plan in another lifetime for this lifetime. Although anything is possible, I suppose. I never thought about it until the way you just expressed it, Carolina. That's interesting. So, I mean, is it possible to do what Carolina said, which is, just to sum up what she said, was to create a plan in another lifetime that you want to have in a future lifetime? Sure. And actually, now that you mention it, Carolina, that's what I've been teaching you guys. If you think about it, you're in this lifetime now as Carolina, okay? And what I'm teaching you guys in my classes is to think more strategically about your lives in this lifetime. And by doing so, what does that do? That helps you think more clearly and strategically and planning wise, because that's what we're talking about, is plans here, in your next iteration of this lifetime, which is what for all of us, it's going to be in the afterlife or heaven or whatever you want to call the afterlife, right? That's your next life, in a sense. If you want to think about it that way, it's your next life, which without a biological body, but you're still going to be alive. Okay. So I'm helping you guys think more strategically and clearly for that period. And you can hang out on the other side for as long as you want. You don't have to come back for, long time if you don't want to, or you can come back very soon if you want to. There are examples of children coming back as it back into the same family, even, or with pretty good evidence that it's the same child. The birthmark is the same shape and as the scar that the baby or the young child who just died, and they come with they like the same toys, they don't like the same movies, they like the same food, they don't like the same food. It's the same personality coming right back into the family. So you can come back right away, or you can hang out there for 100 or 1,000 or 5,000 years on the other side and not come back, like whatever you want to do. But then what I'm teaching you guys to do is, and what I'm teaching myself to do primarily, is to plan on the other side even better than you have in the past, to come back in with a certain group of friends and hang out, do some fun stuff next time, whether that's 5 years after you've died or whether it's 5,000 years after you've died, and hang out on the other side. Doesn't matter. So in a sense, Carolina, without you realizing it, you just described what I've been teaching you guys. Yeah, in a previous lifetime, which is this lifetime, planning ahead for your next lifetime. But no, most of the time people are not talking what crazy Kelvin Chin is, these ideas he's talking about. Most of the time people are talking about right before this lifetime, they came up with a plan. Does that help?
Yeah, but then if that's the case, right before we come back onto Earth, how do we know that that's the plan that we have? Is it just something that's in our subconscious that it's like, oh, hey, this is a great idea? So, that's what I mean.
Oh, no, you come up with the idea. You're on the other side. You're as conscious as you are now. The Carolina mind it exists after Carolina biologically dies. You remember who you were, and your mind is the same mind. So it's your mind
Okay.
that's thinking as clearly as it is right now talking to me.
But plus, I might add, I think I'm hearing a different part of her question.
Go ahead.
How do you know what the plan is and who the person is? And Carolina, in my case, in three very distinct cases that I can think of, the other person recognized me, and I'm really relatively good at recognizing these things. In three of the real important relationships in my life, it's the other person who seems to have been drawn to me for some inexplicable reason and chose me to play an important role in their life. And then soon after that, I realized, oh wait, I remember this whole, I know what this is about. But the other, that's a two-sided thing. It isn't just you having to recognize it. The other person probably subliminally and subconsciously is very cognizant of it, and things just sort of work out that way. I mean, it's
So
life
like
events.
triggers,
Yeah, there are
life
triggers,
triggers.
life triggers, and also sometimes kind of help from the other side. I mean, you get breaks that just sort of go in that direction. In the same way that Kelvin and George ended up, and I forget the other guy's name, the guy, the psychologist who's on the call. In the same way that George and Kelvin and
Tom,
Tom all ended up at the same university. My son had a real, when my wife was pregnant with my son, he visited her and gave her a brief bio of himself, and she was able to go Google it, find out who this guy was. It was really interesting, and he was very close in his last lifetime with a handful of other guys who did something in American history that was sort of very noteworthy and really, sort of a unique band of brothers in a sense. And whammo frisbee, a few of those guys all ended up at the same college in Vancouver, British Columbia. They're all Americans, and they all ended up in the same university, and they lived. I mean, my son is married and has, but they basically live together. Their lives are just completely interwoven. They were inseparable in their past life, and they're pretty much inseparable in this life. And they all just work really productive. They're all drawn to each other in a manner that they have no choice about, and they all chose independently to go to the same university and at the same time and major in the same stuff. So it's a two-sided attraction. You're as attracted to them as they are to you. So it isn't really up to you to, it just sort of happens. It's been my experience.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Does that address what you were getting at, Carol?
Yes, thank you. Both of you helped me come more together into what I was a little confused about. So thank you both.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah. Another example is George and me. George Hammond and my story together. I did not recognize him from another lifetime. He recognized me. That's the first story in this book, right? That's like page 6 in this book or whatever, right? And then I get into it much greater detail in this book. But that's the story where I was having a physiologic, we'll just describe it, experience during meditation, which was unusual. And then he remembered, he already knew who I was, but for a year or two before that, but he didn't tell me who we were, that we were brothers 2,000 years earlier. But he was waiting for me to have my own experience, my own kind of revelation experience before he told me that. So this guy goes to Widge's example of somebody else kind of filling in the blanks, from in this case for me, right? And then later, I can't remember I have it in this other story in the book, whenever it was 20 years later, 30 years later, something, I had this memory of being friends with this guy named Yosef, which is Joseph in Yosef is what, Hebrew, I think. But and I was saying, I had this memory and I was blurting it out in quiet moments when I was alone. Joseph was a friend of mine. I say this, my kids have heard me say this when they were little. And I mentioned this to my friend George once, and he goes, you know who Joseph was? And I said, no. And he goes, oh, that was me. That was him. It was he. George was Joseph. And back when I was an ancient Egyptian priest, I was a high priest in ancient Egypt several times. But one of those times, he was a very, very close friend of mine. So, yeah. Good question, Carolina, for us to help review these things. But you had also had that other question in there that I missed, that Widge caught, which is great. That's why it's good to tag team these things. Any other questions before we call it a session? Anything else? It doesn't have to be about soul plans. It could be about anything related to the afterlife, you know? Any other questions? Anything. Yeah. Anything. Yeah. I just wanted to underscore this one thing I had typed out to myself here. I hope we've woven into this discussion about soul recognition that it doesn't necessarily mean a positive soul mating partner all the time. It just means recognition. Okay. And we've had how many, you think about all the relationships you've had in this lifetime. Have they all been wonderful? No. We've had some relationships with people who have not been so wonderful, maybe even very hurtful, unhealthy. And so just recognizing a soul relationship in the future, what I want everybody to learn from that is, yes, there's resonance, but always discern and decide whether that resonance is healthy or unhealthy for you in that moment, in that lifetime, in the future. Because that's going to be your continual present, right? That's the phrase you guys hear me use, because our present is always changing. So in that future lifetime, that will be your present lifetime. So always assess whatever relationship it is, doesn't matter how deep the connection feels, always assess in real time in that present lifetime whether it's, healthy or unhealthy, and then always assess ongoing, right?
Yeah.
That's, I think, a really important lesson from what Widge and I have talked about today, right? Aside from the fact that, plans can go awry. They can get derailed. They can go off the tracks because of either choices that you've made that are different from what you planned out, or choices that other people have made. I think the choices that other people make are the ones that people forget about. People forget. People think they're the center of the universe. We're not. I'm sorry. You are not the center of the universe, and neither am I. Nobody is. It's just the universe is huge, and there's so many quadrillions of minds out there. There's 8 billion humans here, and that's not counting the apes and the dogs and the cats and the horses and the chimpanzees and the lions and tigers and bears. Oh my, right? It's just, there's millions of minds on planet Earth alone, never mind other inhabited planets in the universe. So they all influence. They're all influencing, yes, very indirectly for the most part, but they influence stuff. People in Congress are doing crazy stuff sometimes, creating crazy laws sometimes that we may not agree with, but do they affect us? Yes, they do. And we don't know that, right? But they affect our lives. So can that derail our soul plan? Absolutely, right? So a lot of things outside of our control. minds creating stuff. And as we said in one of those slides, natural resources or okay, natural phenomenon, nature, stuff that's inanimate can also affect our soul plans and our life choices. So there's a lot of factors. That's why, back to Widge's point, I'll end on this one point, which Widge brought up, which is a really important point, is turning within, strengthening our minds. That's critical in terms of living a life that's more filled with more contentment and inner peace and less suffering, because we can pivot. You can come in with a plan, but you got to pivot sometimes, you got to adjust, because things get thrown at you that are unforeseen, that are not predicted. And so adjusting our lives helps us live life with more fulfillment. And I think, to me personally anyway, that's the purpose of life. Right? Okay, everybody, great to see everybody. Thanks for coming. We'll see you in a month. Oh, actually,
Thank you so much.
February 29th. Is it leap year?
Yes.
It's leap year.
Wow, it is. It is.
Wow. February 29th. We'll see you then, because that's the equivalent of February 30th.
Closest thing we can
Close
get.
enough. In this series, it's in this series of sessions, it's February 29th. Carolina, thanks for your great question. Everybody, Kirk, everybody else, great questions. Patricia,
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
thank you, Widge. Widge,
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate it. Thanks for
you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
here. See you, everybody.